Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Hitakiri Singh. Hope everyone's having an amazing day today. And today we're going to go over some more longsword tips. I had some requests to make a general guide for how to play the longsword. However, I really don't know how to structure that, and I don't know if a general guide is really good for a longsword player. I think everyone should get into the groove of their weapon by just messing around with it a little bit, learning the basics and the fundamentals of how the weapon actually works. And then, usually you have questions like, what do I do in this situation, in that situation? And that's where a lot of these tip videos that I'm making are going to originate from people asking me questions. And it's also the way I learned to play the longsword. I basically played around with it in World for like 1,500 hours, and then met this amazing group of hunters and really started to go deep into the weapon. And the way it really clicked for me was to play with a style that was comfortable for myself, but then just learn, like, what is the standard opener? How do I punish a monster's roar? What's the best sequence to do to get to red gauge? What should I do on a knockdown? What should I do on a quicker punish where I only have time for a couple of quick attacks? That kind of thing. How do I set up my foresight? How do I set up my ISS? So I would ask these questions and I would get information, and piece by piece I would put together my strategy and my game plan, because now I was just finding my solution to a bunch of sequences of events that I wanted to know what to do. And then pretty much that ended up covering the entire fight. And then I had a pretty good idea of what I'm always trying to accomplish every step of the fight. And I kind of want to approach my guides like that. So this video is going to be for beginners, intermediates, and some tips for the advanced. Here we go. Please stick around for the end for our invitation to our group Zero Feints. Thanks for joining me once again. And let's get at these longsword tips. Okay, first on the however many tips this video is actually going to be, however many the thumbnail says, I haven't really decided, because I want to talk about combos that fill your meter completely to get red gauge, and a combo to maintain your red gauge. And this is targeted towards beginners, because the more experience you have with the weapon, you're primarily going to get your gauge with your ISS and your foresight slash. And the first combo that I feel every beginner longsword player should learn, it utilizes two of the longsword's key moves to build meter. One is your fade slash, when you hit your triangle and circle button together. As a hit, it does the most meter gain for any single hit that your weapon has in the longsword. It's half a bar right there. The other part of this that we want to incorporate into our move set here is your special sheath triangle. On hit, you continuously get meter gain even if you do not attack. So by utilizing both of these properties, this is the most efficient combo. As you see, we have no meter, and we're going to start off with a Spirit Blade 1, go into Special Sheath, hit your triangle, Fade Slash, and then you can just mash R2 to finish your Fade Slash combo. As you can see, we gained a spirit gauge level with that combo to completion. And now even if we don't hit the monster again, it's enough of a generation process of the gauge to have another full gauge. There are three really important qualities of this combo to understand. First of all, it's the highest damaging combo you can do to get your meter gain. Second of all, it gains a full gauge plus your secondary gauge refill with one sequence, so you never have to worry about, did I build enough meter to start doing my R2 combo? And the third is it allows for option selects after each portion of the combo. The option select we will discuss more later in this video. A whole lot of things you can do with this combo. I don't want to overwhelm you with the information just yet, but just know the sequence: Spirit Blade 1, Special Sheath, Triangle, Fade Slash for positioning, mash R2 to finish the combo and get your meter, and allow yourself to position yourself around the monster. The only time you really don't want to do this is when the monster is already grounded. There's something better to do, but also if the monster is in the midst of a 360-degree or AoE area of effect type of attack, then this isn't the best sequence to do, because you might get caught in those kind of stuff. But for the most part, this is kind of your bread and butter sequence when you're kind of sizing up a monster or even learning a monster for the first time. And here we're just going to show on this Lollab Arena You know, it's not a monster that has a roar in the opening or big AoE attacks or anything like that. So there's no real threat of just doing an unending loop of this combo. I just add a special sheath at the end to just start it back over again. And it was just a very easy way to dance around the monster and get up to red gauge with no problems. And really, that's about it. Once you get into red gauge, then you're able to go into your red gauge shenanigans of R2 triangles and so forth. So that was the combo we wanted to do when the monster is upright, attacking. But when the monster is knocked down specifically, this is what you can also do. So basically, with your spirit charge, it gains gauge as you're charging it down. You see that? So what that basically means is you never really need to have any meter at all to do a full spirit gauge combo. You can always just start it off, hold the second input for a second, hold the third input for a second, and hold the last input for a second before releasing, and you'll always get a full spirit gauge combo. This is really the best to do when the monster's knocked down because you are more stationary when you do this combo, and it's slower, you know, than your normal spirit gauge combo because you have to hold each step of the way a little bit. So when the monster's knocked down, it is not a bad option as a combo to do. There is a much better tech to do that we'll discuss later in this video. But yeah, you never need to have any bit of meter at any point to do a full spirit gauge combo. And here we're going to use the aforementioned technique against this down Mitsu. And I had no meter, and I just hold each hit, get my meter, get my red gauge. And again, red gauge shenanigans, red gauge fun. Red gauge is just the best, and all us longsword mains know why. One thing I want to point out about being in red gauge, look, your gauge is constantly depleting. So what that means is when you're doing like a spirit gauge combo or a move that requires or eats spirit gauge, it does not reduce or it does not increase the meter. You don't need to have the meter already. You're just in red gauge, so you have infinite amount of meter to do whatever until the gauge is actually up. And so a lot of people do things like that where they'll use the end of the combo to slightly refresh their bar again. But really the best thing to do, especially when you're doing, you know, your triangle combos. Excuse me, I'll probably speed this up a little bit.
You're doing your triangle combos.
Okay, now you're getting low on gauge. So go ahead and do your spirit gauge combo and just hold the final hit until the gauge is actually depleted. Finish it, and now you're back to a full bar. That's what you want to do when your gauge is full, you're in red, you're doing your high DPS moves. Once it's getting depleted, just go ahead and use your ability to use all infinite meter. It doesn't really matter how much you have, and you just want to hold the last spirit gauge charge until you actually see your meter get depleted, and then boom, let it go, and you'll have a fresh gauge to go all over again. Alright, let's go back to the option selects I was talking about. There's certain moves in the Longsword's arsenal that you can only do after completing another move. For example, like Foresight Slash, you have to do it after another move. Special Sheath, you have to start an attack and then go into Special Sheath. Or even something like Fade Slash, even though you can do a neutral Fade Slash, it's best performed in a combo of some sort because then you can add a directional input to the left or to the right. So it's always better to do that mid-combo. And these are the points at which you can shift up anything that you might want to do to base it on a monster's reaction. So the combo we talked about earlier, you know, you have a Spirit Thrust, and from there you could go into a Foresight if you needed to. You could go into a Special Sheath, or you can go into your Fade Slash, you know? And that's why this combo is so versatile, because any step of this process, you can shift up your plan to accomplish whatever else you might want to using the option selects that these moves afford you. The easier it is to pull off really amazing looking things, to be able to just flow with the weapon so much more so than you could by trying to overcommit to anything. And that's one of the biggest problems with the weapon is people are just trying to find basic ways to get meter, and then they're trying to do their R2 over and over again. And once you get into Spirit Blade 3, you lock yourself into a pretty hard animation of 3 swings. You can Foresight out of it now, but a lot of beginning players really mess up at that point. and take damage, or they're just trying to force too long of a combo string. Always incorporate your option selects and then watch. See what the monster does. If he's coming at you, get out of the way. Or instead of special sheet triangle, do an ISS. You know, that's why these moves exist. They allow you to alter your plan at any given moment. So play around with that. Nobody can really give you the best sequence when that is involved. That just goes to your own personal preference, play style, and skill expression. This is what makes really interesting players interesting to watch. This point is actually good for just about every weapon user out there. And that's to know that you can roll cancel in this game. But there's certain animations too specifically that we'll talk about. And one is the animation at the end of your spirit gauge combo. This is an animation where it's slow, you put away your weapon, it's just chunky. It's the same animation at the end of the spirit charge. But in order to cut through that animation, you can always just roll away and you'll still have your weapon out. Now, alternatively, you can also go into special sheath after that animation, which a lot of people do, and in a lot of situations you will want to. There are times that you might want to keep your weapon drawn, and you just use roll cancel in those situations. Still have your weapon drawn, you can still fight, things like that, you know? Generally in red gauge, you're not worried about it because after your roundhouse, you can still go into your R2 triangles. But it's a situation when you're not quite in red gauge yet, in white or yellow, and you've just completed a spirit roundhouse slash. You might want to roll cancel sometimes. It just depends on the situation. And also the other time that it's absolutely invaluable is for your spirit release. There's nothing you can do after the spirit release. The only thing you can do, there's no attack I can do to shorten that, nothing like that. The only thing I can do to shorten the animation of a spirit release is to roll cancel. And you can instantly roll out of it. So yeah, roll cancel for shortening animations for any weapon that has long drawn out animations, gun lance when you do your wyvern fire or something like that. But you can use that for any of these long animations that get you stuck. My apologies everyone, I really wanted to get one video to encompass the tips for the beginners, intermediate, and newcomers. I just don't want it to be 30 minutes long, you know. So we're going to have another video that comes out within about 48 hours, maybe less. And we're going to talk about some more advanced techniques, like why the first ISS here did not proc Counter-Strike and the second one did. I want to have a discussion about some things about hyper armor and iframes on both the Foresight Slash and the ISS that could be really handy for even advanced players, primarily in the aspect of proccing Counter-Strike. It's just really useful information to know. There's a couple of other more advanced bomb techniques that are not really complicated to do, but if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish here, you can often struggle with this. But if you know some basics about what we're trying to do and how we set these things up, they're actually quite easy to do. Like we were talking earlier in this video about that combo to get to red gauge, it's really fastest to do this bomb tech. And then there's also wake ups with bomb techs that you can do to get some really massive damage. This one, it doesn't show the bomb damage from my teammates, but it's like 2,000 damage on that wake up. Also, there's going to be videos coming up from our amazing squad, Zero Feints. There's a link in our in the description for our Discord. We have everyone from beginners to world record pushing speedrunners, and we share each other's information and builds and so forth. So I'm going to get some of our finest members and share their builds with everybody. That's what's coming up. Thanks, and see ya.